Right. Well, I think I will now introduce Phil again. As I said, he's a transport planning consultant and has a lot of experience in design of highways, traffic analysis, transport planning, etc. He was part of the team that produced Manual for Street, and he's working on a new manual for High Street. I didn't know that was... Hopefully. I see. Well, that sounds very interesting. We look forward to seeing that. And he's also worked right from the beginning on home zones. So, without more ado.
Thank you. Okay. What I would stress at the beginning is very little of this is my direct experience. I'm a kind of collector of things, and I'm going to try and collect some things from Sharnberry too. But what I've tried to do is put together a kind of overview of where I think shared space is. I've got some continental schemes, which I think I haven't any from France, but we'll see what they show us. And then I want to talk about some schemes in the UK. I think there's a kind of spectrum going on here. Barrier-free has been used as a term in terms of Kensington High Street, and maybe they're kind of evolving to what we might call true shared space. I think there are still some issues, and then just say a little bit about some planned research. I thought I'd start with that. I mean, I think there's some shared space. We don't actually, as people, we don't need signs to tell us how to behave. I mean, if you said what is the speed limit in that location, I don't know, it's maybe 5 miles an hour, but where is the sign? Well, there isn't a sign. It's in the guy's head, and that's pretty more important, I think, than any sign. Because if he was going even 15 miles an hour, the chap with the children probably might thump him. So I think that's quite a powerful starting point. Just a kind of definition. I mean, I think we know what we're talking about. This is the Department for Transport have just put out some research, which I'll say a little bit more about, and that's their definition of shared space. So the intention is that people should be comfortable using all of the available street area. Just to say, I mean, the name Joost Waal was mentioned, and I know Hans Monderman has had a lot of influence on this whole area. This is some work that Hans put up. He talked about two worlds. I don't know if you know Hans Monderman. He died last year. He was a remarkable man. But he talked about the highway and what was all these attributes were good for a highway of regulated in person. You need a license to use it. It's just to move traffic around, and we think all those are good attributes of a well-designed highway. But a well-designed piece of public realm is entirely different. In fact, it's completely the opposite of all of those features. So where we try and introduce too much highway regulation, too much certainty into that public realm, it doesn't become a very good public space. And the reason is because the things we value about it are not compatible with a traditional highway-led approach, which I think is quite interesting. There's some work that's been done recently. Peter Jones, University College London. I don't know if has anyone seen this document, Lincoln Place. It's a bit techie for my taste. It's a little bit sort of detailed, but the principle is interesting. What it talks about is that you can value two things about a street. You can value it as a link, a piece of movement, and you can value it as a place. And his book, Lincoln Place, tries to give a very kind of codified methodology of measuring those two things as you move along a street, how they vary. I'm not sure that the detail of it is so applicable, but I think the principle is right, that we need to think about how these streets with moving traffic and people function as places rather than just things for movement. But maybe if we need a new sign, maybe that's the sign that we need. So just a few kind of examples from the continent. I mean, a lot of these are drawn from a work of Hans Monderman. This is, I think, one of the early places that he started. I've been to quite a few of these. This is Mackinga in Friesland. A lot of the work of Hans Monderman was in the northern part of Holland. Mackinga is a very nice village. I mean, this is just an example. I've been trying unsuccessfully so far to get this design, this little junction detail, into a lot of developments I'm working on, where it kind of suggests a mini roundabout, but there's nothing to actually say what the priority is. So 3 kind of roads meet at a point. There's a dome there, slows the traffic down, doesn't confer priority on any particular user. And I think it's just a very subtle and nice treatment within a village setting. This is a town, Oosterwolde, where it's quite a complicated meeting space in the centre of this small town. I don't know any photographs of how it was before, but I think there's about 5 roads meet at this point. You can see the steps at the right there. There's a drain, it being Holland, there's a sort of drainage ditch there with a road either side. There's a road coming in to the left, there's a couple of roads coming in there. And they all meet in this kind of space. And just to the left of the picture is a cafe, and people sit and look over that space, and it works remarkably well. There's some people. That picture makes it look a lot larger than it is, but there's some people kind of standing around in the middle of that with cars moving around them. And none of them seem to be injured, and it just worked really well. And that photograph is taken from the cafe where there are tables where people can sit, and it becomes a centre for this small town. Really very pleasant. This is the town of Harren, which is a suburb of Groningen, or Groningen, I should say, which is, I think, a town of about 15,000 people. The route through the centre of it was a street quite similar to many streets that you still see in Holland. Obviously, the cycle lobby is very strong in the Netherlands, and as we heard in Chambéry, the cyclists are very protective of their lane. And I know that they had a great deal of difficulty in coming to the solution that they did, but Harren now looks like that as a town, and it's quite a busy high street. It's quite a thriving high street, and works pretty well. There are buses going through it. In the centre, it breaks out into some squares, so the traffic is still passing through there, but you've got activity and people sitting and just crossing. And at one end of that square, there is a zebra crossing mark, so there's some priority given to pedestrians, but for the most part, people just cross as they wish to, as in the sort of Department for Transport definition. This is a larger town. This is the town of Drachten, and there's a couple of different treatments that Hans Mondeman used in this town. This was a very busy junction. I think it carries around 20,000 vehicles per day, and again a typical layout of a multi-stage signalised junction. The bus station is just quite near to this. A lot of accidents, a lot of delays. What was decided to do was replace it by a roundabout, a roundabout within a square, kind of like what we saw. So it's a very interesting parallel with the work in Chambéry there. But this is perhaps more landscaped. The blue dots in this image are fountains. And what they do, and I have driven through it, it's very, very, very powerful. The height of the fountains varies with the volume of traffic. There are sensors in the road, so the more traffic there is, the higher the fountains come. And they come about so high. So as you drive through, as a driver, you're kind of this height, you enter in this space that appears to be filled with water, and it really is very effective. So it looks like that. Fairly conventional roundabout in some ways, single lane entries, quite tight. But you have these priorities given to pedestrians around the whole space. So it feels like a piece of roundabout priority set within a very nicely landscaped square. And of course, the fountains attract children, attracts activity, and that all helps to civilise the space and make it something to be enjoyed rather than just a piece of traffic engineering. Some very low curb heights you can see there. I'm told by many of these photographs are from a guy, Ben Hamilton Bailey, who you may have come across, who also speaks about shared space. He tells a story that people very quickly after this was put in, people developed a kind of hand signal among cyclists to kind of indicate which way they were going to go. So people communicate as they drive around and cycle around this space. So just adaptive behaviour. Schemes from Denmark, quite a lot of work being done in Denmark. The work of Jan Gale and Gale Architects have developed quite a few schemes. So just a very subtle definition of where the vehicle track is in some of these schemes, which I think works very, very well, very attractive, but still quite busy in terms of traffic. Hennef in Germany. I've not been to this one, but I'm told it's very successful. Obviously, the street lighting is a real feature of the street design there. The scheme in Denmark, a very nice square, again with a subtle definition of the through route, but space there to make use of that for pedestrians. Town of Odense, or Odense, I think it's pronounced. And I can't pronounce that, but that's in Sweden. So these ideas are beginning to take hold in many towns and cities across continental Europe. And I mean, they have a lot in common with home zones. We're kind of used to home zones, and I think the Dutch home zones for me are still a lot better than the ones we've done so far in this country. I think there's a danger that the term has become debased through some not very good home zone schemes. But if you look back at the original schemes that people like Joost did, really successful integration of activity and children's play within a street environment, very, very attractive and very safe. Okay, just moving on to some UK examples. So I think barrier-free was a term that was used. I think Kensington and Chelsea have used that term. Just to say a little bit about where these have been applied. They've been applied typically in what the Department for Transport tended to call mixed priority routes, which is a terrible term, but essentially means a street where lots of activity goes on. So you've got no priority, you've got mixed priority, cyclists, buses, pedestrians, shoppers, whatever. And what was said was that they launched some road safety. This is a quote from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, just saying, for a long time we've undervalued our urban high streets. What's good about them is that they have a hinterland, so people can walk to the shops there very sustainably. But because they also cater for passing traffic and through traffic, they sustain a greater range of shops than you would get just for that local community, so they get a better offer. So it becomes a more sustainable shopping centre through that, and we've kind of lost that. When we take our shopping centres offline, as we tended to do, then some of that is lost. So they can work really well, and we're kind of rediscovering mixed-use streets, but they do have a great deal of problem in terms of road accidents, and the traditional response to dealing with the second problem is being put in lots of guardrail and signage and segregating traffic from pedestrians, which maybe does have some safety benefits, but it can destroy the first objective of creating an attractive shopping street. So there's a conundrum there. As an example, I mean, Kensington High Street, I guess many of you know, was an early example of an urban design-led treatment of a mixed-use shopping street. Most of the guardrailing was removed, the traffic lanes were simplified, cycle parking was put in the centre. So not really kind of shared space in the true sense of it, but certainly reducing the barriers and the segregation between traffic and pedestrians. A lot of the crossings were straightened, so that the chicanes, the sheep pens in the centre were taken out. So clearly making a much stronger relationship between the pedestrian route and the desire line that they are trying to follow. And very successful. I mean, there's some debate about cyclists maybe haven't benefited as much as other groups, but generally it can't be said that there's a major problem here. That generally the results in terms of accidents on Kensington High Street are good, and they're better than the rest of Kensington, and they were better than London as a whole over the same period in terms of accident reduction. But of course it didn't meet traditional highway design standards, but that was a decision that was taken at senior political level within the borough to make this change. That led the Department for Transport to embark on this research, which I was involved with for a fairly short space of time, what they call the Mixed Priority Route Demonstration Project. Not a very helpful title, but it was completed last year. They chose 10 demonstration sites across England, all busy urban high streets with accident problems. There are two in London, Walworth Road, Wandsworth Road. But it was decided that the DFT said we are going to tackle these through an urban design-led approach and a consultative approach. We're not going to tackle them through traditional road safety engineering. And they've been really successful. If you look at there's a report on this, which you may have missed, came out in October, Local Transport Note 308. What it says is that they've all been successful. Substantial reductions in road safety, between 24 and 60%. I mean, over a fairly short length of time for some of them, but nevertheless, indications are that they're all very successful. In answer to the question that was asked earlier, they're all showing noise and air quality improvements. Because of the reduction in the stop and start of traffic, if you reduce the number of times that vehicles accelerate, then obviously you're going to improve air quality. So they're better for the environment. Accessibility, there are more people cycling, more people walking, more people with mobility impaired. They're feeling more confident. And economic benefits too. You know, these are more successful shopping streets as a result of this. Now, I think that's pretty pretty good outcome. You can't do much better than that in terms of all the objectives that you might set for a street like that. So that seems to suggest that if you work with the grain of urban design and you have an urban design-led approach, there's no conflict with road safety. You can achieve road safety and you can achieve all these other benefits as well. Okay, just as an example, this one was amongst the batch that was finished towards the end of the project. So I don't have any statistics for this in terms of road safety, but I can show you what was done on Walworth Road. So very busy, 20,000 vehicles a day, a lot of buses, a lot of pedestrians, a lot of accidents. Typical London radial route, yeah? Bus lanes, so talk about a 6-lane road. Pedestrians, buses, traffic, buses, pedestrians, yeah? Completely segregated. So this is how it was. Lots of guard railing, loading bays. You can see where everything had to be taken over the barrier into the shop. So not a very successful use of guard railing there. Footways that are just not adequate to cope with the number of people using them. Not surprising that people are getting injured. Okay, at the start of it, a change of level, so going up to the footpath on the same level. The bus lanes have been removed. That was a big battle for them with Transport for London to remove the bus lanes. And they've monitored it, and bus times are about the same, because actually the bus lanes were being used a lot of the time for loading, so they weren't actually being used at all. It was just wasted space. So the buses are in the traffic, but the traffic is moving more smoothly, and everyone is getting a better service. Within the centre, there's a very shallow curb difference generally. Much wider footways, street trees. Places the centreline marking has been removed, so no centreline marking. There's a market on the left there, entrance to a market. So many people cross at this location. Very busy in terms of pedestrian activity. In places, the street gets wider where there are bus stops in parts, so that the curb kind of moves out in places. You can see the wider footways there. It's a crossing which looks rather like the Chambéry crossings. This is interesting. There's a median, a refuge in the centre, but it's flush, and sometimes drivers do go over it. What they wanted to do here was to plant some trees along it, but London Ambulance Service objected to that. They said that if there's traffic congestion, we want the ability to drive over that piece of paving, so we won't put the trees in. They've monitored. They're hoping to put the trees back in later, so the tree pits are there. But at the moment, it seems to be functioning. People use it to stand on, but also it's available to be driven over as well. Side road entry treatments, which are becoming quite familiar in London now. This is interesting. One of the busy junctions in the centre, the guard railing was removed, and they used different tactile paving to indicate where you should and shouldn't cross. So the ribbed tactile paving is where the guardrail used to be, and then the dots to try to indicate to blind people where you should cross. So it's a use of tactile instead of guard railing. But that was obviously a much different street scene there. Okay, moving on, kind of what you might call true shared space schemes. The first one is a kind of halfway house, and I'll put this one because I did this one. Okay, so I'm very proud of it. This is Shrewsbury in the West Midlands. If you know, medieval town. A route through the town centre was 2 lanes of traffic, narrowed down to a single lane. Very little curb, very little difference in level. High quality materials throughout, and where these crossings are, which they're aligned with little alleyways that come down across the street, the footway material is taken across the carriageway, and drivers tend to stop for pedestrians at this point. They don't have to, but a lot of them do, and Shropshire County Council refer to them as courtesy crossings, and they've been in there now, that's been there now for over 10 years, and still quite successful scheme. But Seven Dials in London, I think, I don't know if you know this space, really interesting, I think, to go and see. So obviously 7 roads meet at a point, and I think what's really interesting about Seven Dials is you've got 3 ways of crossing that space. If you're a kind of timid pedestrian, or you value your life. You can cross all the way around the outside, and you've got zebra crossings to give you priority at that point. If you're feeling a little braver, you can cross the monument in the centre and do it in 2 stages. And if you're really brave, like this old lady who's going to hit the car, gets too close, you just go straight across, you know. So it kind of gives people's choice to do what they want to do, and you just stand. If you just stand there for 10 minutes, you'll see all these behaviours going on. Really, really interesting dynamic space that's going on there. Fantastic. New Road Brighton, I think, has been is a recent scheme, very successful. This is how it was, and this is how it is now. Okay. Caused a great deal of controversy locally. The blind and partially sighted had some problems with it. There was quite a lot of lobbying going on. But it's been really successful. Street cafes. It looks pedestrianised, but it isn't. And a lot of drivers are avoiding it now because they just don't think they should be there. The ones that do go through very slowly. It was voted the 4th most popular place to spend time in the city. Traffic speed is going around 13 miles an hour, 20 kilometres perhaps. When they did the safety audit, which I'll say a bit more about later, the comment was made, well, there's nothing physical to stop you driving down there at 50 miles an hour, nothing at all. The only thing that stopped, and even at night, they thought there'd be a problem with speeding at night, but there isn't. People still go through there slowly at night when there aren't so many pedestrians around. It just is that the whole quality of the space is changing drivers' behaviour, and huge increase in cycling and pedestrian activity. Ashford in Kent is also embarking on quite a radical changes to its ring road. Ashford ring road is pretty ugly, really kind of dominates the town. They have proposals to civilise it in many parts of the ring road, and I think it's this southern section here that's been done so far. These are the drawings. So this is the future of Ashford. So this is beginning to become quite radical stuff now that's being done. There's a bit of scepticism in the media, but I've kind of been Googling it now and again. I've not seen reports of hundreds of people being killed. I'm sure we would have heard by now if they had to rip it all out. So it's been in, I think, for about 6 months and open. So it seems to be kind of working okay. The Times journalist had a go. These before and after photos aren't that great actually, so I'll probably skip on.